Hello, everybody, and welcome to What Do You Say Anime. I'm your host, Peter. On today's episode, we are reviewing the 2012 anime Shin Sekai Yori. Joining me today first is Johnny. Johnny, how's it going today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
And he's got the new mic, so we can get our female demographic up. Joining us as
Uh,
well as our first moderator is Miles. Miles, how's it going?
How's it going? In episode 59 of the hit cartoon Kim Possible, Ron Stoppable in the Naked Mole Rap says, "What is that? That freaky thing? Yes, that's right. It's a naked mole rat." And what do you know? That's what we're going to be discussing tonight.
Yes, are naked mole rat people actually people? We will discuss that. And our
how long
second
did it take you to
moderator.
find that?
Aren't they actually?
Well, I don't know. We'll find out in the
We'll
discussion.
find out later in our
Oh.
episode after the spoiler warning.
Yes.
Yeah, we will talk about it, I guess. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
And our second moderator is Patrick. Pat, how's it going?
It's good. It's good. Yeah, hello, as always. I don't know. This show was a show that we watched that over the course of 2 weeks as well. We all watched it over the course of 2 weeks. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
2 days for some of us.
It's yeah. Well, you know what? That's the way we choose to consume things sometimes. But yeah, I'm excited to start talking about it. We've got a nice small group today, only the four of us. So we always say maybe that'll make it not as long of an episode, but then we end up talking as long as anyways. Either way, nice. God, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, close knit, maybe. Whatever. Either way,
Intimate.
we're intimate. Thank you. That's especially as we approach Valentine's Day, it's important that we're intimate with each other. So there we go. That's perfect.
Oh boy.
And when we talk about a show like this,
Yeah.
there's a lot of intimacy between uh between the members of the cast. So yeah, let's do our general introductions as we always do. We'll go one at a time, take our turn saying how we found out about the show, what we liked about it in general, first few episodes, our impressions, and then lastly whether we would recommend the show or not. Miles, why don't you kick us off like always?
Sure. So I recommended this show, and I also discovered the show a little while ago while listening to Digibro videos. There is a video titled, and I quote, "Shin Sekai Yori is worse than Sword Art Online." Um, Anyone who knows about Digibro knows that that is quite the admonishment, as he gave Sword Art Online a 1 upon his first viewing. And has subsequently buffed it up to a 2 after the watching of the Asterix Wars. Um, but yeah, so however, I thought it looked kind of cool. The video essay didn't do a lot to dissuade me from uh watching this, and so I did. And I really liked it. So I thought it did like a really really good job with world building and like theme stuff. There were some like unpolished parts for sure, specifically with like animation and like frame drops and a bunch of stuff, but ultimately I thought it was like a very very good like character study, societal study, and like things like that. I liked it a lot. I would thumbs up recommend the show.
Fair enough. All right. Yeah, I watched that same video actually too because when I finished the show myself, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I knew I didn't love it as much as I expected to, or was told to expect to love it. So I actually watched that video, and he actually highlighted a lot of the points that actually dissuaded me from liking this show as much as I could have. So I think that'll be a fun little discussion later on for us to have. But Johnny, what do you think? What was your impression?
All right, yeah. So unlike you guys, I have literally never heard about the show until Miles nominated it 2 weeks ago. So for me, I had zero expectations, nothing to expect going into it, except for the fact that when we searched up on Mal, when we saw the covers of the manga, or is it like no?
It's the manga. The manga is like really
Yeah.
sexual.
Yeah, so like I saw the only thing I knew about the show was looking at the covers of the manga. I was like, oh, this is the kind of show we're watching.
Yeah.
And then like I see that, and then I see like the cover. It was like the art for the show, which is like a bunch of kids. I'm like, oh, okay, what kind of show is this? Like, what am I getting into? So like I'm glad it didn't go that way because otherwise we probably wouldn't be saying these good things about it. But
Saki just has giant breasts in the manga. It is unnecessary.
Yeah.
I am looking at the cover right now. It is the manga has like a 6 on Mal, and the show has like an 8 something, which I think is like the largest gap between two things I have ever experienced.
It's really high.
those like manga onlys that like say that like the anime ruins the show.
Well, the thing is, it's not sourced from the manga either,
No,
though.
it's sourced from a
It's sourced
novel.
from an actual novel, not even a light novel. It's a regular book, like an
Like a-
actual
Well, there's
like a
two
book.
a
different
book, something
sources.
you would have to read. No, there's no different sources. The book was written, and then the anime was created off of that book, and I'm assuming the manga was created off of the anime. I can't imagine, or maybe the book may
No, the
whatever.
manga was certainly created off of the book. It's
Well,
completely different than the anime.
but it's well, isn't it? I
They
the
feel
came
character
out. They
design-
came out at roughly the same time. The manga and the anime. They both came out in 2012.
All right, well, because I find the complete difference of the manga though is so much more different from the source, from what I've heard, compared to the anime. I don't know. Again, I don't know for sure, so maybe I'm speaking out my ass. But yeah, so go ahead
Yeah.
and finish up, Johnny.
Yeah, well, yeah. Either way, going on after that, yeah. So like, I found the show really enjoyable as well. Like I said, like Miles said, like I think the story build, I think the world building and the characters were great. The reveals about like what the world really was really well done at the end, and I would recommend this show 100%. It's a really fun ride.
Alrighty, Pete, what have you got?
So I've known about this show for a very long time, and in the anime community, you either give the show like a 9 or a 10, or like a 3 or a 4. Like that's just how it seems. Even though it seems like most people are in the 9 to 10 range because it has a pretty high score on Mal. I've heard a lot of bad things about this show, so I was really interested to see where we checked it out and just to get my opinions on it. And it was a really interesting ride, and it was a very unique storytelling. Kind of reminded me of like Steins Gate and how it progressed the story, where it starts slow and then it ramps, and each episode gets better and better as it goes. And it was a really fun ride, and I absolutely recommend it. This was a really good show.
Fair enough. All right. So for me, I had probably heard of this show before, just because people talk about it. It is a very popular and highly rated anime on Mal and in general. And then once I saw it get nominated, I was like, all right, this could be a cool show to watch. Maybe I'll finally knock it out and give it a shot. I did not enjoy it nearly as much as everyone else did. I think I would still recommend it to people who uh I don't know, to people who can look past uh bad animation and or frustrating animation is maybe a better way to put it, because there are times where the show is like stunning, and then there are times where the show looks like a picture book almost, or frames are just awful, that and it's jarringly bad. I, I don't know, I think you guys are giving the characters a lot of credit. I thought they were pretty okay compared to what I expected from what was supposed to be, from what I had heard. This seemed like it was a deep character study of like humanity and humans, and I thought that the plot carried the show a lot better than the characters did myself. So uh other than that, I guess I don't really have much to say in general about the show. Um but yeah, again, so I would recommend it to certain people, but I would not want to rewatch this show myself. I didn't nearly like it as much as I hoped I would. So yeah, Miles, you usually kick us off with our talking points. So going forward, all spoilers are off, all or on, I guess. So if you have not watched the show but want to, it is pretty spoiler heavy again because it is very plot driven. So make sure to tune out for a bit if you need to go watch the show quick, or if you don't care, just be warned. Miles, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So I think the easiest way to have a conversation about the show is to establish the setting first. The setting is in a way the most important character in the show. Um, so we start off in like a post-apocalyptic Japan, several hundred years in the future. More than 500, I know. I don't remember exactly
I
how
think they
many
said
it is.
thousands
It's
actually.
a
Yeah.
thousand. Yeah, it like so that emperor rose to power from the Rose Dynasty 500 years after 2012 or whatever. So
Mm.
that's how I do it, and that's in the future from that. So it's sort of like uh, a lot of ways like reminiscent of like a rural, probably. I'm not great at time frames in Japan, but like I would guess like 1800s style sort of looking town. Is that correct, Pat? I know you're more of a history guy.
Yeah. So again, from that video that you mentioned, he talks about what the styles of the town looked like, and it was, and from what my also from my own knowledge, it looked more like late 1800s, like
Okay.
just before the start of like the Industrial Revolution in Europe and the United States, which was when, of course, the revolution ended up happening in Japan like 20 years later. So, yeah, so I'd say like late 1800s is when is the style of the town. And it's funny you say that because I wrote down that this show looked a bit like Higurashi or Shiki to me because of the location, and I even said it looked a bit Madoka-y too. So I think that's funny. That's how I knew. I was like, oh, Miles is gonna love this show no matter what.
I
Like
do love a boondocks town in the middle of nowhere, Japan.
exactly. So that's why I knew. And I was just like, oh well, now I see why this show picked up Miles's attention going into it. But yeah,
yeah, this show
continuing.
really does have a lot similar to Shiki, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It
Yeah.
does a lot. And now are you seeing why I didn't like it as much now, probably?
Yeah, because you have bad taste.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
yeah.
I do.
So, little podcast lore. This segment of our podcast essentially started when I begged Pat to watch Shiki for me because I wanted to talk to
Mhm.
someone about it.
And I begged him to
Um,
watch Orogairu, and he did.
yes.
I
And I probably got the better end of that deal, but I love Shiki. So,
Shiki's
uh,
fun. It was a ride. It was a show. I just didn't, I don't know. I appreciate it now more, seeing how we actually deal with a pandemic rather than the
how you would
potential of a
hope.
than rather than how I would hope we would deal with a real pandemic. So you know what? I have to give it a little bit more credit. It wasn't bad by any means. It
um,
was just weird to me.
it is weird. I like weird shit. So, not to
Yes.
get too sidetracked as we walk a mile down that path.
Hmm.
The town is like sort of controlled by like a council of elders and stuff, and you get like a lot of culty vibes
Oh
really quickly.
yes.
Like there's like ethics council and like an education council and like all of that sort of stuff. A lot of things that we'll talk about later are actually like really well sourced from like how cults control people. It's like pretty neat. Even things like playing music to like have people go in at certain times, like controlling scheduling like that. Um, the society's view of like how sex and stuff does works is like also like really reminiscent of how cults control their members. It's pretty cool. So over the course of this story, our group of um five, or is it four, or is it maybe three, I can't really remember,
Well, it
kids.
starts off as six.
I
It's
think
it's
that
6 people. Yeah.
it starts at six. Yeah, I can't remember. I have this inkling that there were more, but I definitely know there were like at least four. So they it's like this group of students, and we literally progress through their lives from the age of 12 to the age of 26 for the ones who make it, and go with them on a journey as they learn about the world around them in the town they live in. So that is your general setting. Um, I forgot a very major detail in that
Yeah.
almost everyone in this world has unbelievable psychic powers.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you for addressing that. I was gonna
I,
mention that. Yeah.
yeah. And they play a very central function in society. Um, Once your powers develop, you get sent to a different school. And you get like put on a certain path in life. Um, they sort of use powers in lieu of technology that had exist and still sort of exists in the world. Um, and it is like the main, uh, I guess, like pillar of their society. I would say it was like their
Yeah.
use of power.
They they're pretty much gods with what their psychic
Yes.
powers are capable of doing, right? That I guess if we want to start talking about it, we can talk about the psychic powers that they have. Give some examples of it.
Yeah.
Like one of the characters, I'm terrible with names as always, but especially in shows that I didn't like. So what's the red-haired girl had the
Maria.
mirror. Maria had the hair. the mirror power, right? Where she
That
could
was so true.
so true. Thank you again. I'm terrible with names, so thank
Y-
you.
You sure you want to handle this segment, Pat?
Well, no, I remember what the powers were. I remember what like they could levitate. They
Yes.
could.
Maria
I
could
remember the
fly
powers. I'm just
well.
bad with names.
And Sotaru could turn flat surfaces into mirrors.
There you go. So those are two of the psychic powers, but there's also other things in general, like, you know, ripping trees from the ground and turning them on fire, and making arrows that were shot go back in the direction that they came from, literally exploding things out of thin air, just by thinking about them, including other humans. There's a lot of things that uh, these psychics seem to be able to do, which is why, in the first place, when the psychics first existed, they caused this collapse of society, which is why they live in this post-apocalyptic future, right? Where these cult, as you described in this like cult-like feeling, is because humanity figured out the only way to control psychic powers and make sure that people were not like truly just going to decide, oh, I want to kill a bunch of people today, is to make that an inherently bad thing for a person to do and make them not experience the temptation of it, or the frustrations that might lead to a person becoming that way. I think that's the right way to describe it. Pete, what do you think? And Miles too. You can
Yeah,
go
Pete,
ahead.
you can describe the whole death of shame and all of that.
Okay, so like this is a really interesting concept because it's brought up. I had like different theories about the death of shame. So essentially, it's like you're not allowed to kill another human being, and if you do, you just die. Essentially, that's what it is. So Miles talked about earlier when they moved into different schools with these kids when they developed their power, because the kids that didn't develop their power didn't get into the school, and then those kids go bye bye because essentially those kids, if they wanted to at any point, could kill people with powers. And the people with the powers are essentially powerless. So that's how they have these like different like cats that they use to essentially just kill off anybody who has these like abnormalities, I guess, for them, and something that would cause a threat maybe down the road to their society. And I thought it was a really interesting concept because I thought this was, we get brought up in the show a lot of these mind control, twisting your memories, these types of different things, where I thought that this maybe was a thing where like it's implanted at birth, where it's just like, hey, if you kill another human being, you essentially explode or implode or something like that. And we learned down the road that that's not the case, and I thought that was one of the really cool like mysteries surrounding the show. And yeah, it was a really interesting like concept of how they like govern themselves with these powers.
Yeah, they essentially just culled the kids that didn't that posed any kind of a potential threat to the society that they had. And I know, Miles, you're a huge fan of Psychopaths, right? That's one of your
Yes.
favorite shows. My understanding is that they address a society in a very similar way, where like people who are outliers are, instead of being re-educated or being monitored very closely, they are just eliminated, right?
Yes.
Is that a good way to describe it? Yeah. So
Yeah.
They're killed.
um
Yeah, they're murdered. They're just
yeah,
dead.
that's psychopaths. They're just killed, right? Well, I was trying to put
But
it very
yeah,
kindly and without spoiling psychopaths too much, but yeah, they
it
essentially
happens
they
in
just get
episode
murdered.
1 of Psychopaths.
Yeah, it does. All right, good. That
Yeah.
makes me feel better. Yeah, they just murder people. They just kill anybody that doesn't comply with society. It's very authoritarian, but in this way, in this show, it's a little different. I feel like, because it is definitely more along that cult sort of thing, where, oh, these kids they just vanish because, you know what? They would have been a problem down the road anyways. There's no changing that. There's no point in risking it. They're just gone. And again, I don't know if you want to draw the comparisons, because again, when I hear about this show, or when I did hear about the show, it was compared to Psychopaths a lot as well. And I know you are very
Yeah.
connected to that show.
There's actually some interesting differences. Like, one, Psychopaths is technically a little more lenient because there is room for you to be like just imprisoned. There's room for like
Right.
you to hold certain jobs based on your quote unquote crime coefficient, which is just like the likelihood that you pop off any second. Um in this, if you're at all, because you can't ever, like, they literally can't deal with you once you start committing the crime.
Right.
Um they, there isn't any of this in between. They kill you. Um and so like in some ways it's like harsher than Psycho-Pass is. But I guess like they also, yeah, I mean, it is very similar, right? They even have like personality ratings and scores, like to like measure your ability to deal with trauma, and if that's like not good enough, they're concerned about your like ability to develop empathy, essentially, and like deal with trauma, and so they off you if that's not good enough. If you don't have good enough control of your powers, they off you because that can
Yeah.
cause issues. Basically anything that could cause any threat to society, and these are admittedly very large threats to society. Causes you to get cut.
To
So,
be cold, yes.
and not even just cold, and then everyone you ever love's memory is altered so that they no longer remember you. um, it is
Yeah.
quite brutal. So yeah, that's sort of how it goes, and it's like a genetic implementation in you, that the death of shame. And I actually thought that was really neat because there's like a few ways you could like tie that to having powers genetically and have it work that could also explain um what like how ogres would work, because when our cells divide, like our sex cells, there's this like step called crossing over. And so like the chromosomes um like transfer genes across each other, basically, because you have chromosomal pairs, and then they split, and each like sperm or egg only has one of those like pairs,
The
right?
sets, right?
Yes. So because of how that transfer happens, genes that are located close to each other physically on a chromosome um have like a very, very high transfer rate with each other. It's why white lions are often like cross-eyed, for example, because the genes that cause both of those traits are located so close to each other that if you get one, you essentially are almost guaranteed to get the other. So if you implanted that gene in a location that was next to having powers, 99% of the time you would translate the death of shame. If you didn't get the power gene, you would 99% of the time not get the death of shame. And it does leave some wiggle room for the people who are not affected by it.
Holy shit, that was insane.
Um,
In the words of Channing Tatum in 21 Jump Street, science, bitch.
That's funny. But yeah, so I guess we are already addressing the psychic powers a lot. And this is where the show lost me a bit because it is hard to do these psychic powers like we've described them. They can literally just take whatever, if they think of something, they can obliterate it, right? Like that happens a few times during the show, especially the rat people, the people that are rats that are or former humans that don't have the psychic power. I guess is that how I'm not sure if I fully
they're
grasped that.
descendant of the humans, of
Of
like prehistoric
humans,
humans.
prehistoric humans that did not, or the prehistoric in this sense, yeah, the humans that did not develop the psychic powers are
Yes.
now geneticized the rats or whatever to be subservient to the people that have these psychic powers. It's pretty wild. Um, but for me, the psychic powers they're hard to do because they're inherently unfair or they are inherently impossible to balance, right? If we're talking like in a game that they're overpowered, right? They're OP. And they're so hard to do right in a show because of how OP they are. And even in this show, they can literally just disintegrate whatever they want. Right? They are never power checked. They seem to have infinite power. They can charge, they can create electricity if they wanted to, right? To power lamps or to power the little cat thing, battery, whatever the fuck that was. Uh,
Oh yeah, the false Minishira.
yeah. Again, there's so much in this show that I just can't. It's hard for me to remember everything perfectly. But yeah, that and it's not a problem that this show only has though. There are plenty of other shows that have struck, and that's why I say it's hard to do psychic powers correctly because they are inherently so hard to balance and make not overpowered that it affects the rest of the plot. So for me, it's just like when they were having these big conflicts, how why can't they just psychic power their way out of it, or why
They
when they
do.
were well
Like,
they do
Well,
sometimes, but they don't do it immediately. It takes
I
them
think
forever to get there.
they establish a lot of the rules. Like for example, you need direct eye contact first of all to affect whatever it is that you are using.
Not well, do they? But does the guy have direct eye contact when he uh throws the arrows and hits these specific people back with the with the arrows or with the trees that are on fire. Like he doesn't have direct eye
Like he
contact with
has
them;
to
they're
actually
miles
like be
away.
able to see the object. It's
He
like
has to see the arrows, right? Like he just volleys the arrows back.
But he doesn't. But well, then with the trees that are on fire, he kind of just pinpoint accurately snipes these people in the trees. Like that's it. Again, that's what I'm saying though. It's like it's hard to make these rules work when they are uh psychic powers because psychic powers are stupid. They're overpowered. Imagine if a real person had the power of telekinesis or that's what it's called, right? When you can lift things and levitate
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's imagine if a real person had that. There's no stopping that person. Or it
Well,
is
yeah,
almost
I mean that's a
impossible without that
major
power.
theme
Yeah,
of
well,
the show
that's the major theme of the show is that when these powers came to be,
that
like
they had
the
to,
entire
yeah,
world just
just
collapsed
collapse. They had to
because
genetically
they just
modify people to account for the thing you're talking about.
Right, but
like
how
there's
do they?
literally no limit to what they
So
can
how do
do.
you
So,
come back from that collapse though? Like, how do you even get to this
well,
point?
that's what they did with the show to implement those things, like the shame of death, where like you can't hurt another person, otherwise you die. There
And
was
they
no
also
other
have,
option.
so we know that like there was an emperor who like was leading like of the Rose dynasty or whatever, right? Who was in charge of like an empire that believed in like the superiority or whatever of these people with like psychic powers. And we know that he was eventually assassinated. Um, and that like from the ashes of that empire, different like colonies and stuff were born. And this is just like one of those. And over, you know, that millennium, they've implemented these different rules over time to deal with the various threats that there are. So I don't know. I guess like that's the like a lot of it is like they are intentionally not living to their full potential to avoid societal collapse.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
They're almost. It's like taking like the very smartest and then also the very stupidest people and just getting rid of them completely to make sure all of society. I feel like I read a book like that in high school where it's just like the smartest and the stupidest people were gotten rid of because if you took it the government had you take a test and then if you passed the test with flying colors, you were culled because you were too smart and could potentially overthrow the government. But if you were too stupid, you weren't of use to the government, so they got rid of you too. So I don't know. I feel like that
It
was a
sounds like every young adult book.
right. Well,
Yeah.
every young adult book, but like yeah, I feel like I read that in high school somewhere. But either way, it was like a short story. But again, whatever. Um, I just I get bothered by it. That I guess that was my frustration with it because the the death by shame wasn't perfect in my eyes as a solution to the to the existence of these powers. I didn't find that it
So what would you say was made worse by the existence of the powers?
um to me I think that it just makes it hard to tell a story about society when you have these powers that make a an actual functioning society so inherently unlikely or impossible to exist. I think that I would probably have to think more about that question because that's a hard way to. I didn't even think about that at all, but
I
I
feel
think
like
that
over
was
the
my big.
span of like 1,000 years, like the story is told, I think it's very feasible, like what they did in terms of like how they controlled their powers and stuff. I guess it wasn't an issue for me at all.
Hmm, fair enough. Well, again, I guess that's why that's where the show lost me, and it's a very important part of the show to not get lost by. I guess like, um, I don't know. Like the other problem is I had it was another one of the issues that was addressed in that video you mentioned earlier was why they weren't very well prepared for ogres in the first place. Like why were they if they had dealt with ogres in the past and had they called them ogres in the dub I think
Hmm.
right
Oh, in the
uh,
sub they do it too.
and they
Yeah.
sub they do it too
Yeah, they're called
like
ogres.
okay, because I thought it was only in the dub and they called them monsters. But like, if you know that ogres exist and know that there are even like the ones that can be smart enough to blend in and um, not stand out in, let's say, in their schooling, right, in their actions, like with the game where they were uh, playing the game not necessarily to win, but to see if anyone would cheat, and then you would
Yeah.
call that person. If they were smart enough to bypass that, or an ogre knew what the expectations were, why didn't they just have why didn't like every person carry around that I think it was they literally used anthrax, right? As the
Kill
um
them too.
it would kill yeah, no, but like they had the capsules ready, right? They had That's what they went searching for in Tokyo. Why
Like,
didn't they have more of those?
Because that was an
because it
ancient
was
lost
made
technology.
pre-war.
Yeah.
It was made before the world collapsed. So like they said in the show, only Saki's parents knew about it, or like a
Yeah, it's
very
like
few amount of people knew about it. So they didn't know like how. First of all, they didn't know how to produce it, and secondly, like, would you really want to risk carrying something around where if you accidentally trip, it kills everyone around you painfully?
yeah, it seems
It's
terrible.
it's like
If you needed it to be ready to, well, then how
But
else were they getting rid of the ogres in the
so
first
but
well
place?
by
so okay.
using. Okay, so wait, can I explain this
Yeah,
one?
go ahead, Johnny.
So that's what the monster rats were for. They had so like they explained it in the show because they introduced the shame of death. That means that they couldn't kill the people without powers either, right? So their
Right.
solution to that was to just turn them all into rats. Therefore, the rule wouldn't affect them, and you could still kill them. But then also that part comes in where they kind of need the monster rats because if there's an ogre that appears, they can't do anything about it. Like they can't directly kill other people, which is why they have the cats and like the monster rats.
And the
So
monster
that's what they
rats would
do.
handle the ogres, but
Yeah, so well, they wouldn't be able to handle them if they already existed. They would just kill them before they came to be.
yeah, but like again, I guess that's my point though, is that how could they have not foreseen that an ogre would eventually come
Well,
to
that
be?
Well,
actually never happens though, right?
yeah.
So um like they like 200 years in the past, right? There was the only ogre that's appeared in this society, right? So it's this
Mhm.
one guy, and he lays waste to like everyone until that doctor is able to kill him. Then the society goes, holy shit, we have to change how we do things because we let this happen. So that's when they start culling all the children. Um, so they start very proactively killing all the kids. They develop the impure cats. They take tons of precautions against the existence of ogres. They change the entire way their society works because of the existence of ogres. Just because it didn't work perfectly or super well, for a few reasons. Like one, it coincided with the invasion of like the monster rat rebellion, and some other things like that it probably had like a large effect on it. Like all the energy and resources couldn't be devoted towards that. And then also, I think it is important to note that the child wasn't an ogre, right? Like it was just a person who didn't associate themselves with humans, and so the shame of death didn't work. Like it was still implemented in them. So
Yeah.
like their planning was good. It was another unforeseeable circumstance that tripped them up.
Yeah, I guess I thought that they had these had dealt with ogres in the past. I guess I didn't realize that that was like the true first one or the only one that
It,
they've ever
it might not
You
be
see
the
you see
only one,
two. You see
but
two in the first episode where like he destroys like Tokyo in modern day, and then the second was when the doctor has to kill him. Like those are
yeah,
the only two instances of ogres we see,
yeah.
and then
So we
the
know,
story that they tell
yeah.
to like
So
scare
we
the
know
children.
at
Yeah.
least in the last 300 years there has been one. So it's not exactly something that they're
Is that
concerned about
common?
happening
I thought it
frequently.
was more common, I
Yeah,
guess.
it is not a very common thing. I think that the
Mhm.
karmic demon thing is more common.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, they do say that that happened like at least more times because they say that like one happened recently, like apart
yeah.
from
They show
the
that
one
farmer
of the main
girl
characters.
Yeah.
where like she ends up killing her parents because of her power leaking type of thing.
Interesting. Okay, so that clarifies it a little bit for me. I guess I'm still not fully sold on it, but I think that at least it establishes like some of the logic behind why they weren't ready for it or why they weren't as prepared for it as I thought that they should have been.
Okay, wait, so
Um,
like, what do you think they could have done like
Yeah, that's the
to
thing. Like I don't
prevent
know
them
what they
more?
could have done. They
Yeah,
can't just
because
kill the
they
ogre.
were systematically already killing children as soon as they showed any signs that they were going to like basically not fit in.
I thought that they had the anthrax. I thought that that was that. I thought that the anthrax was there as a response for for the existence of the ogre. It wasn't that it was just this one time thing way back.
So they describe it in the show, right? So the American government invented the weapon while there was a war between psychics and, I don't know, unremarkables or whatever we would be, muggles. So like while there was a war between psychics and muggles, the US government like made this like biological weapon in order to try to like deal with them, but it was like a little too late. And like because of that, there was like a limited quantity of it. And they must have had some in Japan in order to like maybe try to produce it before society completely collapsed or whatever. But like they just never, like, I'm pretty sure that is it on the continent or the island or whatever.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I understand that better now. I thought it was something that they did in their post society that, or
No.
that they had in their post society as a response to ogres.
If you were right, if that was true, you would be
But why would
completely
it?
correct. That would
Why
be
would it
really
be in
dumb of them.
Tokyo though? Like, why would they leave it in a random room in Tokyo though if they made it?
Well, only like didn't like only Saki's mom know it because she was the librarian and she had like access.
Exactly.
She had like
It was
access to
forbidden
those
information.
texts. Yeah, she was like
They
the only
call
one
it-
that had access to those texts. So that's why Saki was able to locate the anthrax because her mom was the librarian.
Right. Again, I must have very much so misinterpreted or missed.
And that's why we're talking about it. It's great.
Yeah. Oh
That's
yeah.
also why you don't watch 20 episodes in one day.
Or you can and still get the.
Hey, as long as you finish it, that's fine.
And you still get the gist of the show.
Like
Well, you know.
Let's be nice to Pat. We all have made mistakes before.
I watched all of Gurren Lagann in one night, and I understood what the hell was going on, and I didn't miss anything. And well, I did miss things, but not things that changed the story. So that's where I guess it's lost. But that's beside the point. That's not something to talk about right now. I guess so. So we can. One thing I did like and it seemed to be a theme of this story, that relates to this, the idea of these ogres, right? These people that are just so bad that they make society collapse. It's that humans suck awfully in this world, like in the world that they are established in. Like humans are the worst. And I like that because it's real life. It's real. Humans suck. We suck. We are a terrible species, right? We are a great species. We do great things sometimes, but we also do a lot of terrible things. We do a lot of fucked up things. We don't we hide from our mistakes. We don't address them very well, very often. And I think that that's something that is addressed in the themes of the show really, really well. I don't know if you guys agree.
No, I do. I think it really shows like our hubris as a species too is something that I think is touched on like super hard and super quick. And I was talking to Pete about this before, similar to what you're saying. I liked how this show was just like kind of a downer from start to finish. It was never happy. It didn't really have that happy of an ending.
Kind of happy at the end, but like not really.
They solve like the problem, but like their society is still like
like hundreds of people die. And they have to like a couple of people get some like bittersweet endings. But like overall, like they didn't fix society, right? They like are working to try to improve it, but like they're still participating in this like overarching like system or whatever.
I can argue there's almost no correct thing for them to do because like either like you stop these practices and then what happens? Another ogre appears and you just have more people to die, or you keep the system and then more like little kids just die for no reason.
Yeah,
it's like there's no right answer to this problem they have.
Yeah, I do think that like that was just sort of something, I don't know. I really liked just how it, like every turn, every break, shitty things happened to our main characters just consistently. And sometimes for no fault of their own. The thing that I was like most interested by was this random throwaway character they used to replace Shun later on.
So good. So good.
So like Shun is one of the main characters for the first like 2 time frames, and he is this thing called a karmic demon, which means he can't control his power usage. It sort of like leaks around him and affects the world, causes mutations and just overall destruction. Which is another cool thing because it explains the existence of karmic demons, explains like all the new fauna and all of the new creatures and stuff that have popped up over the course of this like 1,000 years and stuff. Because at the beginning they were talking about all of like the rapid evolution that happened around the same time that Powers came out, and so like karmic demons' existence and this like mutation, how they cause mutation, just like in everything around them, gives a really cool explanation for how that happened and why these psychic powers have spurred evolution just by existing and like some of them leaking. So he goes away, he gets brought into room 101 and killed. And so he they the town council and like the ethics committee, the education committee, like try to erase and modify people's memories to avoid traumatic things such as losing friends or like learning about what society is like and stuff like that. And so what they do is they take some random dude from group 2 in school and make everyone think he was Shun the entire time. And so people have like these memories with him, but none of them are like very good. And so like 2 of our main characters like were romantically involved with Shun. They both like had crushes on him. One of them dated him for a while, and the guy who dated him was like, you know, I for sure was in love with this guy, and for God, I cannot remember why. Like why? Um, and
It was
same,
horny.
same with our main character. She's like I feel like I'm supposed to like you and be really excited that you're like trying to date me now, but like I'm not, and I can't get it. And just like the concept of like hijacking this guy's life in order to like maintain um order, like added another layer to like memory manipulation to me. It wasn't just erasing memories, it was like implanting memories into other people. And I don't know, I thought that was really cool.
I think
I
that's
don't know.
I think that's really good because it's sort of sets up your interpretation on how like the console is and your point of view, because I thought they did a really good job as they like learn more and more about society, that you view the people who are like running the city as like these evil people, and they're just manipulating everybody. That way everything is peachy, everything's perfect. And then as it goes on, you learn more about the ogres, and then you think to yourself like, are what they actually doing is correct? Like, are you willing to like sacrifice one in order to save 100 type of thing? And then you have like this moral dilemma. It's like, you know what, these people are actually doing the right thing. And then you learn down the road, actually, just kidding, they're all awful people. They're all tyrants. They are just like doing these awful things to people that are like legit humans, and just everything that they do is just it's just a mind fuck essentially. And I thought that was my favorite part of the show, was just like the whole like politics, the mind games that like these select council people were playing with each other, and how that just progressed the story.
I liked. I think a good comparison to be made, that if you're not fully understanding what we're saying, is to the Spiral King from Gurren Lagann. You know, you're brought up in the first few episodes to think of this guy as this evil, oppressive person who's literally culling humanity, right? He's making sure that we don't progress to a certain population point, you know, by forcing humans to live underground and oppressing them. But then, as the story goes on, you find out, and you think that he's the main antagonist of the story, right? You're brought up to hate him, and then as the story goes on, it's revealed that he had a reason for doing so. I think that's
Trigger
a good
likes that,
comparison.
huh?
Yeah, they do.
Um,
Also,
That's
yeah.
this is super random, but if you know the lead singer of Limp Bizkit, Fred Durst, is in a movie called Population 436. And it's something very similar where the population of a certain city has to stay 436. Otherwise, people start dying, and like the devil comes, and essentially this town is heaven. And you're like, what? Why do people think that? And it turns out it is heaven. So it's just like a really crazy movie. And that's like the whole time I was thinking, I was like, this is like Population 436. Like, these people are controlling everybody because this is essentially like their heaven on earth. I'm going to put it that way, because their lives are so much better than everything else that's going on in that world.
Yeah. It's I think there are a lot of comparisons to be made, partly because this isn't like a fully original idea, right? That there's a society that is established, and that anybody who goes outside the realm of society is cold or is taken care of, right? Like that's a very or this authoritarian there's an authoritarian presence that is ruling things, and then anybody who
Yeah.
tries to go against them ends up uh being put down. I think that that's a very common theme, especially from books, well, like we said, young adult books. It's a very common theme,
Most
and
dystopian, right?
most
Like,
dystopian societies, right?
I think
It's the same theme.
I think the differences for this one is that like the people, like at least the kids anyways, don't find out about it until later. Because like for most other stories, they know that like if you do something wrong, that you're going to be like you're gonna
Mhm.
die or whatever.
And
Yeah,
For
that's
this one, only group one finds out because of like
using their
uh,
brains and finding the thingamajig.
yeah,
well no
like
no
carbon
they
computer.
no I remember there was a scene when the ethics committee they said group one was part of an experiment where they were
Yes.
given more free will than the other groups. So they're the only people in the society that actually like know about this. All the other people are like completely oblivious and have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. What I thought was neat about that too was that that goes terribly for most of the members of Group One. Like, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Well, I mean, like,
it like actively kills four of the six. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
um,
Well,
and it
to be
yeah.
fair, I think Shun would have died anyways, but
Yeah, Shun had a disease, right? Like a genetic disease, so he probably would have died
no,
regardless.
I don't think it was because of genetics. It's just the fact that he was too good, so like his power took over him.
Well, it's a disease, right? The inability to control your powers I forget what disease they call it, but when they're talking to the false Minashiro, both the ogre syndrome and the karmic demon thing, which have been like turned into this folklore so it could be made into like a fable for children, um, are actually disorders of some sort.
Right, things that they can't control, which is why the idea that they can try to control them through schooling and education seems weird to me. I guess the whole point of the
See, like,
schooling education is to find them, though, not to control them.
the thing that I'm confused about, like, is it a mental condition or is it like a disease that just comes out,
So
like,
I
I don't
think
know.
that
It's a genetic disorder.
yeah. So like, but like, it's important to know, Pat, that like a lot of these things is like environmental stressors, like express disease things, including genetic ones. Like you can have genetic diseases and just never ever know
That's true.
because of like different environmental stressors. So when they're telling the story about the original ogre, right? They talk about how he had like a really hard life at home and that was like ignored and he was having all these issues that like weren't dealt with and stuff. And like for things that are similar to that in like real life, like you can like there are things that you can do to tell someone's going to be a serial killer, right? Like you can look at
Right,
someone's genes and be like they have like a higher probability of like being like this or like a psychopath or anything like that. It doesn't always come true, right? So like,
right,
you know, if you grow up in a good environment or an environment that, you know, in this case like really like tries to you know, attack these values or like attach these values to kids, then um, you know, you can curb some of that. And when you can't, you know, they do it. So it's not that like they're learning and stuff. I would say definitely has an effect, at least on the appearance of ogres. As far as um karmic demons go, I don't think so, but I think that's what all of the, like the power training was for, because we see Shun have to like use his powers constantly in order to focus them to prevent like danger from happening around him, like when he takes the balls out and like plays with those and everything, when he's
right.
talking to Saki, when he's basically like bye
Don't take
forever.
that out of context.
um yeah. Yeah. um
In the
and
manga, the scene was drawn very differently. Yeah.
yes. um the manga, they only focus on the lesbian relationship. It's
Yeah.
they really focus on it. Um, and so, um, like that was like because they never explained why people who suck at powers but still have powers get offed. And my thought was that like potentially their inability to control their power perfectly was like a sign that they could be like a risk for this or something like that. And because we know that her sister who was off before she was born, or no, whose memory she was forced to forget. She had a sister who like left a goodbye note etched into a mirror, and it was like written poorly. And like maybe she didn't have the best usage of her powers or whatever. So, those are the kind of things we see that sort of like adds to piecing all of these things together and like figuring out why they do various things. Which I don't know, I enjoyed. There's a lot of like, not like assumptions, but like what's an educated assumption? I don't know. Like there's like there's a lot of things you can like that get added, and then once you learn different things, if you go back and like think about it, it's like, oh, this is probably this scenario applied here before we knew what this was. Which I really liked. So
Yeah, I think that's fair. If we want to move on a little bit, we can talk about some of the more anime aspects, if you will, where it's like animation, sound design, or music in the show, that kind of thing.
yeah,
I thought the music, um, it was sensational.
It was really good.
yeah.
The
For a
use
show
of
that
the
didn't have an
actual.
OP.
Well, yeah, OPs are only part of it. That's the thing. So for me, like, there's soundtrack and then there's like the OPs and EDs. I think that I usually separate those two things because
You don't separate the ED from the soundtrack?
That's what he's saying. He
I
separates the
literally just
ED, the
said
soundtrack, and the OP into like three
Oh,
different.
okay, I see it.
Yeah.
well,
No,
yeah,
yeah,
I
I see.
even then I put OP and ED kind of together because it's like
And
they're
two
supposed to
separate
be,
things.
yeah, two separate things. Well, like there's a soundtrack, the actual sound that's going on during the show, and then there's the outside of the show what's happening, which of course sometimes the ED plays over the show and it has a meeting. Sometimes the OP plays over the show. But that's beside the point. In this show, yeah, like you said, it didn't have an OP. It The music in it was sensational, especially the use of the actual song or the overture that is the From the New World overture. That was really cool that they used that at one point during the show. And I didn't love every song that was used throughout, but I think that in general, like especially the more soothing tracks or the less like action packed songs, like the very smooth songs were very very well done and in general amplified the show. I don't know. Would you guys mostly agree with that?
Yeah, I would compare it to like Violet Evergarden or like Made in Abyss with the soundtrack, where it really added, like the scene was better because the music was so good. That's just my opinion.
I agree. And then also the absence of sound sometimes was like really good. Like they did a really like, and we'll get into it. I think almost everything was good except for the animation, which was like a 4 for some reason. Like it
Yeah,
was,
The,
I was
the
about to
animation
say.
was awful.
yeah.
Like
It,
it was actually awful.
See, that's what's weird to me because like there were moments in the animation where it peaked like really high,
There
like
was,
the sun
yeah,
starts.
absolutely.
There were some really, really good scenes because, like when you think of bad animation, we're gonna go back to another Watch Club show that we talked about in the past, roasted many times in the past. Handshakers, right? Handshakers was like consistently bad throughout animation, or it was consistently the same, right? Where it was like this ugly mess of 3D being mixed with hand drawn a little bit. I think I don't even remember anymore, but that's the way I remember remembering it.
You're right.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm glad I'm not that scatterbrained. But in this show there were like moments like with the sunsets or sometimes with the psychic powers that was very, very well animated and shown. And that it was mainly the background art now that I think about it. The setting was really, really well drawn. But then the characters themselves, their character designs weren't that interesting to me. Uh they
Really?
their faces were really
Oh, I
fucking
loved the
weird.
character design.
I
I thought
hated
it
them.
was great. I
I
loved how like understated it was. I loved the color palettes. I loved like all of the
There was
traditional
like 3
garb and stuff.
colors. There was
Um,
like 3 colors
Miles,
that you could pick.
I think it's like because they look very similar to
I
Devil May
think the
Cry,
aesthetic
maybe.
of the show is kind of dull, but I also agree with Miles. I thought like the character design, their wardrobe that they used was like really good.
I think their wardrobes were cool, but they were like not. It was weird. They didn't feel like they had like a theme to them because like there was at first.
Really?
Yeah, because at the beginning they had like traditional looking garb, right, that fit with the setting, so to speak, of like ancient or not ancient, but
Historic, yeah.
historic Japan. But then the outfits would just change. They had no like consistent theme throughout the episodes. Like they would literally just constantly be changing clothes, which is cool because normally half the time in anime people are wearing the exact same shirt, the exact same shoes that they were wearing 5 episodes prior 4 months ago, or something like that. But in this case, I didn't understand it because like usually outfits are used to project a narrative or to project.
That's really interesting. You say that because like there's especially you just said shoes. There's like specific parts where like when Maki is young, like she wears like boots, and as she gets older, she wears like more comfortable shoes. And then when you see her in like her yukata, I think it's called like that, you see like the traditional Japanese sandals.
Right.
And I really liked how everything like was like that aesthetic of everything was like matching with like historic Japan, the minimalistic I guess style because of like they don't really have like textile shops really, and I thought everything was really good, and the characters themselves, like the difference between like Maria and Saki and like Satoru, I thought they were all like really well done.
That's interesting because I found other than Saki, I didn't really like many of the characters in the
Even like the
show.
council members, because I thought the council members were like really
Oh, they had really
diverse.
cool, like the mask and the guy with the drums and stuff. That was like
Yeah.
so
Well,
cool.
no. So the character designs were cool. I thought you meant like the characters themselves. Like, sorry. So like the character designs again, in general, were they were cool, but they were just some of them just felt random, or they didn't feel like they fit in with
Interesting.
with the way that the show is being done. I guess that's where
I'm
I
going
stand.
to extremely disagree with that take.
Fair
Yeah,
enough. That's fine.
and I don't know. I love it when they. This is gonna sound weird, but when there's like no shading on animation, right? Like when you have like no cell shading or
Yeah.
anything like that, like that aesthetic is like a bajillion out of 10.
I
And so, yeah, Johnny.
I would definitely I would have to disagree with you,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
you know what? I'm gonna say it. This show, if you just take like the best frame from this show and the best frame from Violet Evergarden,
Yeah,
this
that's
show's better.
Okay, no, no. Okay, no.
Ooh.
Okay, so
Now,
let's
overall, Violet Evergarden is clearly better because
oh
the
my
frames go
god.
into each other and there's no
I,
skipping. Um, but
I Miles, you just started a civil war.
we will fight.
In
no.
the words of
Captain
Has, you are
America.
So like,
spitting right
so like
now.
I can
Yeah.
see you liking that though because that's the same art style for Devilman Crybaby. Which,
Yeah,
like, the
I
characters
have
are
a
again.
I have a trope.
Uh,
I'm a
it's
consistent man.
yeah, I don't know. It just seems lazy to me. It feels like you didn't put effort in, which like I know it's not true, but it's just what it looks like to me.
It's funny
Like
because
putting in a bit of shading isn't that hard to do.
I know exactly. So it's not that lazy to not. It's a clear stylistic decision.
Yeah, it just feels lazy. I don't
Got
know.
him.
It's like you could have done it, but you chose not to.
But do you think it would look better? Because I don't. I disagree.
I
Yeah,
also
Like,
don't think it would
I
look
think
better.
it would make the scene like one thing I have an issue with the show was like the light is like the lighting because the backgrounds were often like the main like the characters and the backgrounds often like stood out a lot. Like normally like in
the
shows like they
characters
kind of
themselves, yeah,
yeah
they
like they
stood
don't
out.
blend into the environment. It looks very like what should I say like out of place.
Well, it looks like they were taken from the background and then smacked onto the background,
Yeah,
right?
like it
That's
feels
the
like
way
they
I
don't
would
fit in the
describe it.
same world.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
interesting. I think it like helps with the fact that it's like supposed to be like an older time frame and stuff. Like I think the
Well, it's a new timeline. What do you
well,
mean by
yeah, but
time
okay,
frame?
like you know what I mean. Star Wars takes place in the future too, like or in the past or whatever. You know, like it doesn't like it's supposed to be like a more primitive society,
mhm.
like technologically. And I think like when you have that like 1800s Japan vibe, having this sort of like flat coloration like really accentuates that.
That's fair. I'm definitely gonna still side with Johnny on this one because I think a good example. We all watched SpongeBob growing up, right? Especially the old episodes of SpongeBob. You remember when you could see, you could tell when a piece of coral was going to be moved or if a door was going to be opened, right? Because it was like slightly different shaded than the rest of the scene. I don't know. Maybe I was the only one who
You
noticed
were
this because I
paying way more attention to SpongeBob
to
than I
SpongeBob
was
than I
when I
did.
was a
Well,
kid.
I'm ADD, so I pay attention to things. Again, I still love and I loved it. It was fine. It wasn't something that bothered me that much, but it was always just like I'd be like, "Oh, that rock's gonna move," or they're gonna fall on top of this," or
That's
something
I
like
have to
that.
go back and watch some SpongeBob.
Yeah,
That's really
yeah.
neat.
We can do that after actually. If you remind me, I can show you
Yo,
some stuff.
nominate SpongeBob next week.
It's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
anime.
There we go. It is an anime, my favorite anime. Yeah. but no, like you could see those things, and that's the way I felt about this show, where it's just like a bit. And the reason why though is because there was the background or the shot, the set for the rest of the shot for the rest of that shot was stagnant, right? Nothing else in that shot was moving other than that specific thing. So like that's why it had more detail drawn to it, or that's why it stood out, because it was essentially put on to that background, right? Like that's why it it looked that way, I guess. And that's how I felt about this show, where the characters would look almost like they were pasted onto the background after the fact, which of course is how it usually looks, or that's how it's actually done in every anime, but most anime don't make it stand out that badly. I guess that's where it lost me the most. But yeah, I think we've talked enough about like the art and the production, right? So like the production wasn't perfect, but again, there were times where it was really good, which is why I think the times where it's really bad stand out so much. Um,
Yeah, I agree with that. There are like jarring, like it looks like you're playing a game on like 20 frames per second or something.
uh
Moments like during the action scenes and stuff. Like the show when it was like calm and like serene things were happening, or like emotional things were happening, had like really good frames, really good shot composition. The animation wasn't very complicated, um, so like, yes, so like, um, the that's when it like shined, because like the individual frames in some of these moments were like really really good, but when the frames were all pieced together, um, I think it like hitched and lost a lot of thing. And then also like with their psychic powers, like action scenes where they were just like standing there exploding things was like a little anticlimactic, like because
well, that's what I'm
there's
saying.
no
There's no
dynamic
tension.
to the, but it's not even that, but it's not that there's no tension, it's that there's no like dynamic requirement to their powers, right? You don't need to, like, you know what I mean? If they were doing like hand signals or something, or like, kamehamehaing people or whatever, and there was like any sort of movement to like indicate that psychic powers were being used and like where you were directing them, as opposed to people just like turning around like completely static and just
Yeah.
exploding things, I think it would have done a lot for making the action in the show seem
Because
better.
like the only
Well,
thing
didn't
that
they
they
use the
use that
same
for
sound
is
effect
they only
like
use
every
that for
single
like the
time?
mirrors, right? Like because he like does it with his hands when he was like describing the mirrors, and that's like the only time I saw them like use like a hand movement or something in terms of their power. But yeah, like what Miles was saying, they just like look at you and you go boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no tension, or tension about what's, well, I guess there's, again, maybe no tension is the wrong word, but yeah, they just, it just happens because, again, that's
Yes.
why psychic powers are dumb and stupid to tell a story through, because they're just overpowered.
Wrong.
There's
Watch
no
Mob
way to
No, but
Psycho.
it's not. It's the issue isn't that they're overpowered. It's that they like are. They were not imagined in a way that was dynamic and entertaining as far as watching someone use them.
I
Like,
guess, but like if you had to point to someone, then you could say that that's a less powerful psychic person than someone who just gets to think it, right, or whatever.
yeah,
Like
well, you have
that's
to look
where
at them. But yeah, like I mean, that's. But also, like like even if you have to like point at them, like at least you
you're
have to
doing
point at
something,
them. Like you have to
right?
do something. Like um, and there are scenes where they're like having to do things like without their psychic powers or whatever, that go okay because they can get taken away occasionally. But and we do see that you get fatigued if you use them too much. It just is like a small side note. Like Satoru, because he's the only one who can use his powers when they're first dealing with the rat people, um, starts getting really, really, really tired from his constant usage of all the powers.
Mm.
Um, so
So one more thing that I think the show gets a lot of flack for, and it's uh something that I didn't have a problem with, but I guess I could see why people do. I can't, but like I can see why it exists as a criticism. That's how I should phrase that. I have no idea how people see this as a criticism, but it is one. It's the Yuri and the Yaoi stuff in it, right? Like so again, let me make sure I'm very clear on my stance on that. That I am pointing out that the show is usually criticized for the existence of, for one, the boys love, or the girls love, the idea that humanity could evolve to a point where you don't love someone because of what gender you are or your genders in general. You love them because of your emotional connections to them. And I really liked that in this show. I think that that was a really cool way to address sexuality and gender and things like that in a society, especially a society of psychics or people who are just an evolved state of mind, if you will. Um, but a lot of people dropped the show because of the kiss between the two boys very early on in the show, right? Like, and that I don't understand that criticism
Well, that's pretty
at all.
homophobic. Like, I'll just go out
Well,
and say it. Like,
that's the point.
like that's yeah.
Or they
Um,
just don't want to see that, which I guess, you know what, if you don't want to see it, then that's fine. But at the same
it's
time,
10
don't wreck the
seconds of the
show.
show. You
Right,
know what I
don't
mean?
wreck
Like,
the show over it.
I'm not
Yeah.
like excited about dudes making out or anything, but like, it's literally 10 seconds of the show.
Right.
It'll be okay. Um,
Yeah, again, that was my point, but I think you can't talk about the show without at least acknowledging the existence of the reason why why so many people are so excited to hate on it, you know? I
yeah.
think that that's part of it too.
I feel like a better criticism of that would be like the reason that the Yaoi and Yuri stuff exists in this is because the society is like a little bit post romantic. Um,
Mhm,
it's not like completely post romantic. Like people definitely have feelings for each other. But they do describe how like they use sex as a like de-stressing device and they like encourage people to have sex with whoever like they want. And so it's like less about that being okay and more about sex just having a different function in society. So I could see someone, you know, and I don't necessarily think this is correct, but like I could see an argument where someone would say like it isn't as progressive as it's making itself out to be because of these caveats.
right.
Um, but I think that ultimately, I mean, you see that like they kind of act like the society is going to be like pretty like polygamous, and then it just never is, and like everyone has like one person they're trying to bang the entire time.
That was
So
really interesting to me
yeah,
because I just assumed like if everybody was just using it as like a de-stressor, it's just like I don't know. I just felt like in that situation, like you just bang anybody and everybody, essentially, whenever you feel stressed or whatever. And but I did like the fact that they like emphasized it when they were like going through like that puberty age. At least that's what I thought, because it's like that's when you are like just super horny all the time for no reason. Like you're in math class and you get a stiffy. It's just like
you got to bring
what?
the book up with you to do the math problem.
Yeah, exactly. So I really
I need
like
to do
I
that.
really like that emphasis of like that was really like the pinnacle of showing that phase, I guess, at that specific age. This is like one of those
Sound,
like little things that I really liked about the show.
sounds like the start to a bad hentai or
That's the
doujinshi.
manga if you want to
That's
read it.
again, that's the point though. Is that it's the manga. The manga takes that and says, "Yeah, let's throw that in there." And oh yeah,
Like, they're
why
not
not?
polygamous in that either, are they?
They're not, but there is a scene where Saki and Maria are banging each other, like while they are discussing something as like a group of 4 or 5.
It's so
So
weird.
it's like
But
all of them.
are they just like right next to them while they're
Yeah,
going
they're
at it?
all just like talking to each other, and as they're talking to each other, Maria and Saki are like going at it, and then like talking like really dirty to each other and stuff, and it's like really weird and graphic, and like everyone
Is
else is like,
Mamoru
"Hey,
there?
can we like?" Yeah, Mamoru is like the
Oh,
biggest.
poor
Yeah,
guy.
and he's like,
NTR, NTR, NTR.
can we? He gets the last laugh.
Did you read the
Um,
manga?
Yeah, he does get the
and then
last
he
laugh.
dies. They get murdered. So yeah, so like he, you know, like they're all like, oh, like how do we escape from like this cave with the monster rats we're in? And then it's like, oh, Shun, do you have any idea? And he's like, I don't know. How about you, Maria? And then like meanwhile, she's just like sucking on Saki's boobs or whatever. And it's just like 1 second. And it's like, this is so unnecessary. It is completely unnecessary. It is crazy.
It's very
And
weird.
the issue is that like it it's so weird because it doesn't even fit the tone of it. Like the rest of it is like serious. It's like they're almost doomed, and there's just this weird, really horny sex scene happening in the middle of it.
Well, it's not in the anime, right?
It's not in the
No,
anime. No,
not at all.
no, the
Yeah,
anime
I'm gonna need
is
that chapter, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll put
Posted
a
it. We
link in the
posted.
description.
We already posted it or scenes from it, right? I think we did a few days ago
Pete
because I
did.
remember seeing it. Oh, Pete did. Okay, so there
Yeah.
you go.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, that's right. Chapter 4.
just outed yourself. Yeah, just outed yourself. uh, but yeah, all right. If that's, I think that we got a good general idea of what we talked about. Do we want to move on to best boy and best girl? I feel like the show has enough potential for that, even if you didn't like the art or didn't like things about it. Miles, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'm going to go with Tomoko Asahina for Best Girl. She is the head of the ethics committee. She is 267 years old. Um, and she is a boss. I really liked her. She gave me like really good, scary, like head bitch in charge vibes, where
Yeah.
she seemed like very kind and compassionate, but like also like the entire time she was speaking, you were like very aware that if she wanted you to die, you would. Um, and I thought that was cool. I also like how they made her functionally immortal. Um, Telomeres are at the end of our DNA, and when DNA replicates itself because of the way it does, there's a little bit that you can't replicate. It's like 3 or 6 um, nucleic acids. It's not a lot. So over time, creatures have evolved these things called telomeres, which are just code genetic code that means nothing. It's no protein. It's just at the end because every time you replicate your cells, you lose some of your DNA. So eventually you run out of that and you start getting a bunch of cancer and you die. So that's like a very large part of why we age as people. Um, she found a way to restore her telomeres, and so she is able to like stay at whatever age essentially she um, did that. Ages a lot slower. That is true, and that can actually happen. So lobsters can restore their telomeres and are functionally immortal. Um, they do not stop growing. They will never die of old age. There is a side effect of this though, where if you have the ability to restore your telomeres because you're like adding all of the stuff back on the end of your DNA, you are like very, very, very susceptible to getting cancer. So lobsters either get eaten, die of cancer, or just like grow too much that their body
Yeah.
can't function anymore. But they don't die of old age because they can restore their telomeres, and I love it, and I think it's cool. Best boy, I'm going to. You know what? We're just gonna just be really all
Do
over the
it.
place today. I'm going to give it a Squia. He was I would guess, say, kind of the main antagonist of this. He is the monster rat who tried to overthrow the humans. He was very deceptive and, murderous and stuff, but also he believed in democracy, and democracy is really good. And he stood by his foundations, and for that, because he, believed in his morals and what his cause, he was sentenced to an eternity of torture. Um, so that sucks for him, but I gotta say, I came around to him at the end there, after like learning about all of the history, and I think at first I empathized with the people, but like the monster rats were clearly very intelligent beings, and the only difference between them and the humans were the ability to fly and blow things up with their mind. Which admittedly is a very large difference, but as far as like ethical rights go, it's not a very large one. Um, so I'm
just
gonna,
just that slight difference.
yeah,
Just
minor
that.
difference, but shout out to him. That's what I got.
Fair enough. All right, Johnny, what about you? Best boy and best girl.
All right, so my best girl is probably gonna be the same as Miles, is Asahina Tomiko. It's probably like I have very similar reasons for liking her because like
Have I told you had
because,
good taste yet today, Johnny? My
yeah,
God.
yeah. I disagree, but anyways, so like
Oh.
my reason for liking her is that like when the ethics committee is brought up, it's like you think that they're like these super evil people who are like doing this to, like make the kids like hell, like their lives hell. At least that's how I interpret it. Like from the start of the show, we don't know too much about the world and like how about like the ogres and all this, and then like when she's brought up, you kind of see like why they have to do this stuff. Like she comes in, she's very nice and understanding, like she doesn't like yell at Saki for like breaking the rules or anything. She's understanding because technically it's her fault since she was the one who did the experiment. So yeah, for me, best boy is actually kind of going to be the opposite for Miles. I'm going to go with Kirumaru, the other for
He,
like the other rat
yeah,
colonist.
he's cool too.
Yeah, he was. I like that. Like even though he didn't like the humans, like deep down, he still went along with them because he knew it was like the better path for like the queen, for like his colony as a whole, because like he also didn't like the humans at all. He was just doing it so that like he wouldn't die, obviously. So it's
Um,
just yeah, I like how like he's like I like also like how he sacrificed himself at the end for like the sake of his colony. I thought that was really nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that too. I think what I really liked about the two different monster rat colonies was that the reason they never teamed up against the people was because they themselves had like political differences essentially about like what type of government system they wanted to run. And because of that, they were like not able to like team up because they had both at various times had thoughts about overthrowing um the gods as they call them.
Right.
Which is just like the people. But like
The people with
that
godlike powers, but
yeah,
yes.
but there was like different cultures and so um like that's why they could do it. Yeah, well they call them gods. I don't know if you watched the sub or
They
the
did.
dub, but
They
yeah,
did
okay.
call them
So they
gods,
like a
yeah.
like yeah. So like I thought that was really neat. I think it just like added a lot to like the world and the world building or whatever.
Fair enough. All right, Pete, what about you?
Uh,
Best boy, best girl?
yep. Same with Johnny. I was actually going between Satoru and Kiramaru, who were my best boy, but I went with Kiramaru. I like that he's just like this low key, like this military genius. He won every fight like decisively. He was just so much better than everybody else. And then I really like this character that he is dealt a hand that is not the best, but he's going to play it anyway. So you see him like serving the humans essentially. But at the same time, he's kind of like doing his own thing. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to go to Tokyo and look for tanks. And then if we find tanks, then you know what? Maybe we'll do something. He goes to Tokyo. He loses a third of his men. He's like, you know what? I'm going to go back to serving the humans because you know what? It's better than dying. And I really just like that aspect of it. And then him helping at the end with Saki and Satoru was like really good. Just like the mind game that they play at the end in order to defeat my best girl, Aki, who is Maria, what's her name? Maria, whatever.
Maria?
Maria and Mamoru's kid, because if it wasn't for her, there wouldn't be this revolution, there wouldn't be this change in culture, there wouldn't be what society needed to go forward. So she is my best girl for murdering hundreds of people.
Fair enough. All right, and I'll keep it short and sweet. I really like Saki the most. She's my best girl. I thought her appearance was the most interesting out of all the women in the show. Although Aki was very cool as well. The the ogre, quote unquote, right? I thought the tattoo on her face or the thing on her face was pretty cool and very well done. But I enjoyed Saki the most as a person as well. I think she was uh, I think she was most relatable, and I liked her leadership skills and things that uh, were shown. Although I do have to say, Tomiko was pretty damn cool too. The head of the Elder Council. She was like not too all knowing, where it becomes really annoying, but she was also very knowledgeable, and it made sense. They gave reasonings why she was so knowledgeable and why she was in charge in the first place. So I like that a lot. Um, and then best boy, yeah, I like Squealer too. Democracy's cool. America, fuck yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, democracy, baby, and the rest of the guys in the show,
Combination,
the
my right?
human guys were kind of just like they were there. They didn't really do much for me. I didn't enjoy them that
All
much.
four
So
of our best boys were monster rats.
yes, they were. Well, they were humans before they were or descendants of humans, which is also fucked up. We didn't really talk about that much, but it's really fucking dark that they just said, ah, yeah, any of the regular humans that survived the apocalypse that were normal humans, yeah, you get to breed with rats now and create a subspecies. Like that's really cool. And you're subservient to us now too. Like that's something that happens apparently in post-apocalyptic society. So yeah, cool. Alrighty, I think we're ready to move on to our closing thoughts. So, Miles, why don't you kick us off? What's your closing thoughts and your final score?
Yeah, sure. So like I really like this show. I think it's like really, really well put together. I think pretty much everything in it is like either foreshadowed or is called back to or, all of that. Like all of the stuff that happens has like plausible explanations as far as like within the universe of the world. Like there aren't psychic powers, but like in this world everything makes sense or whatever.
Hmm.
I think that it tells like a really sort of like grim story about humanity. And I also think that like that grimness is well earned and it hits some like key things that people are like um you know uh hubris, self-preservation, all of these things.
Right,
I really liked it. I really like the ED2 fireworks are cool. I am going to give it a 9.
a 9 out of 10. All right, there you go. That makes sense. Yeah, the ED was very nice. very pleasant. My dad had to add that to my Spotify playlist if I can find it on Spotify. That is for sure. Johnny, what have you got?
Oh yeah, so my favorite thing about the show is how well they did the world building. I think it made a lot of sense about everything that they did. Like, I really enjoyed like how they brought up like that, how like they explained like a part of the history in the first few episodes, and then they explored more into it afterwards, providing more detail and context as to why they did these things. Yeah, that's my favorite part about the show. There were some parts I didn't like, obviously, such as the animation. I didn't think the music was that good. I didn't really notice it, to be honest. But I thought the interactions between the characters were nice, and the world building was very. It's one of my favorite. I think it's probably one of my favorite world building in anime. So I'm gonna be giving this a 9 out of 10.
Awesome.
Nice.
9 out of 10. There you go. All right, Pete, what about you?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I really liked about this show. There was a lot of questions I had, and I think every single one of them got answered. The only question that I really had was how the cats got made, and then at the end of the last scene before you see them touching her baby or like her pregnancy or whatever, you see Satoru playing with like these genetic cats. I was like, oh, like they just genetically made these cats. So it's like literally every question I had in the show was answered, and I love that. I think they did a really good job of putting everything together. I thought it's had a great cast. They did a really good job at making me care about characters that I didn't think I would care about. I'll put it that way. The only thing that was like really lacking was the animation and like the severity of like the fights. I guess I'll put it that way. If you even call those fights, I mean, you just like look at something like Mob Psycho, which is like psychics fighting. It's like god tier, and then when you see this, it's just like whatever. There was like one really good fight scene I thought where the rats essentially attack the colony for the first time, and you like to see a show off with the mask dude. His name is Shisei. I thought that was like really well done, but for the most part, it was really lacking in like I guess like the impact. I'd put it that way of these like powers. I wish they could have done maybe a little bit more, but for the most part, I thought it was a I was I was hooked at like episode like 5 or 6. It took a minute for it to get going, but when it did get going, it was really good. There was times where I said like I was gonna watch like 3 episodes and then go to bed. Then I ended up watching 6 because I needed to know what was going on. I thought that added like a really nice level of suspense. The music was fantastic. We disagreed, but like the character design and everything about that was I really enjoyed. Yeah, this show is really good. I don't understand why people like give this a 2 or something like that. This show is really good. I'm giving it a 9. This was a great show.
A 9 out of 10. There you go. All right. So I guess I was the main naysayer in the group, or the person who didn't like the show as much. Overall, though, I still liked it. I like Pete said, I don't understand how you can give this show a 1 or a 2. Like, so again, I kept referencing that video that Miles brought up, where the guy says it's worse than Sao, which. In my humble opinion, it is, but that's because I like Sao and I'm biased and I'm a homer, or whatever you want to say. But that's but to say that but the thing is, he doesn't like SAO. He hates Sword Art Online and
Yes.
thinks this show was appalling. This show is a 1 out of 10. That's where he lost me. I I don't understand how you could hate the show that much unless you were just bored to death with it. Which, of course, I was at points. I didn't find it fully entertaining, or nearly as investing as everyone else seemed to. I don't know. Again, maybe I just need to let it simmer longer. Maybe that's part of it. But even then, I don't know. There are other shows that I've binged that have caught my interest and kept my interest that this one didn't. So uh, I don't know. I've never liked psychic powers. I don't find them appealing or interesting at all. I think they're inherently just dumb and overpowered and unbalanceable and just I will even after your explanations. I think it's cool, like you said, with not with telomeres, but with the idea of the DNA being explaining how like the death by shame or whatever worked. I think that that's cool, but I still don't think it would function as perfectly as it does in the show, and it doesn't even function that perfectly in the show as we find out through the story. So, for me, this show is a 7 out of 10. Again, I didn't like it. but it wasn't bad. Like it just wasn't for me. So I don't understand how anyone can give it a score much lower than even a
Yeah.
6. I think I don't
Yeah.
understand how you could objectively give this lower than a 6 unless you value animation as your top thing and only thing that you judge a show by. And even then, this show's probably a 5 if you only valued it by animation because
I
there are
was
still
looking
like the stunning peaks. Go
through
ahead.
Digi's comments, like just like scanning through like texts of the video, and he just like misses a lot of things. And like perhaps it's the show's fault for like not showing them well enough. Like it's possible like you miss some things too. So it's like
Especially
definitely
with the amount of exposition that they do throughout the show, because there
yeah.
are a lot. We didn't talk about that. I forgot to mention that too. That's one of the things I had written down. There are some moments where there is just exposition dumps that are so freaking long that it's like, like I can't believe I missed some of these things apparently that I missed because it seems like this show takes a lot of time to just sit there and tell you what's going on or what has happened in the
Yeah.
past, whatever. I think that's a pretty valid criticism from Digi's
Yeah, but he like missed like so like he was complaining that they just didn't explode the rats, but the rats dress up as humans, so like they can't use their powers against them and stuff. Like there's like
Mm,
because they have all of the knowledge of like the false like they it's implied many times that they captured a false Minashiro and like have learned about all of these things. Um and so like there's a lot of stuff in there, but like they never say that, right? Like it's like I don't want to like sound douchey, but it's like subtle that they can't kill the rats because they're dressed up as humans. Um and like if you're I don't know, like I guess I shouldn't say subtle. It's easy to miss, right? And so like that's bad. Things that are easy to miss isn't good.
mhm.
I would say. So like yeah, I think that there's definitely room for like criticism in that vein.
Yeah.
And I think it's also easy to miss something when you just talk about things for 3 minutes and they have like 9 important things in there. And if you remember 8 of them, but not 9 of them, you miss something, like that's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
There's the whole episode exposition dump. What was it, like the third episode or something like that, where
yeah, where they just talk to the thing
they
for,
talk
yes,
for 30 minutes essentially, and it's just like, man, if I looked down and if my phone buzzed and then I looked down and I looked back up and I missed a single line, I could have missed something that could affect my interest in the story or understanding of the story. So I don't know. Again, I at the end of the day, I think it was well put together. Like there were a lot of things that were strong about it, but I couldn't get into it, so that's why I ended up limiting it to a 7 out of 10 for me. However, when we total up our scores, this averages out to an 8.5 average, which is I believe that's about what the mallet. Let me
Yeah, it's like
double check.
8.42, I think.
8.35 is what it is on
Okay.
Mal right now. Um, I think it is slowly going to continue to descend because I do remember when I first looked to show up, it was like an 8.6. So, and not like within the past few weeks, but just in general. Like, I don't know, a few years ago I looked and it was pretty high. So I think we, like usual, we're pretty much on the nose with Mal in the pretty strong 8 to 9 range, at least if you liked the show. You'd
except
think
for
it's about that.
non-Baka.
Except for Nanbaka, what that's the anomaly. That's the cat box.
The
The end all
cat
be all.
box, nice.
Mm, yeah. But yeah. So now that wraps up our discussion of Shin Sekai Yori, or
From the New
God
World.
from the New World. Thank you. Gosh, I'm already moving on to our next week's or 2 weeks from now show for our Valentine's episode. And Miles has the tallies and the results from our voting, including community members who didn't even show up tonight. So thank you, community members who voted and wanted to participate in our in what shows we want to watch. I want to remind anyone still listening, please vote in the comments. Vote. Come join our Discord and talk to us about these shows. We would love to talk about them more. Because again, we only have an hour and a half or an hour or so to talk about these shows, and we want to talk more. We love discussing these shows. That's the whole purpose of this club, right? So please feel free to comment and leave your recommendations or your votes for the following upcoming week. But yes, so Miles, reveal to us what we are watching for our Valentine's Day episode that will occur on not Valentine's Day because you can't plan that properly, or
Yes,
we can't plan that
it'll
properly.
be taking place 8 days after Valentine's Day. As
Yes.
everyone knows, the second most romantic day of the year, 8 days after Valentine's Day.
Yes. Yeah.
And so in the surprise vote, chapter 4 of the Shin Sekai Yori manga one and we'll just
Wow.
be watching them bang each other
Let's
for the entire
go.
chapter, while other people try to discuss how to
I'll be
escape
role
from a
playing as
cave.
Maria.
Yeah. So no, we all nominated romances and also High School DxD
Yes.
this week. So coming in last place was High School DxD. Just wanted to establish that. In third place, we have Tatami Galaxy knocking its second, whatever point,
Legacy point. There you
Yeah.
go.
In second place, we have Zuri Zuri Children. Knocking up its first. Jesus Christ!
Whoa,
Notching
they're
its
children,
first.
bro.
Legacy point. And in a commanding first place, we have Watakoi. Love is hard for an otaku. So that is what we will be watching. Love is in the air. And as three otakus and me will learn.
Whoa. Whoa. All right, you're right.
What?
I host an anime podcast. You got me.
Yeah, so that's what we will be watching over the next 2 weeks and discussing. Please come and join us. We have a Discord. Pete normally does all this stuff, so I will kick it to him.
Well, we need to nominate.
We gotta
first.
nominate
We
first.
need to-
and
oh
then,
my God, I
Then
got
you
ahead
can
of
kick it to.
myself.
Then you
Yeah.
can kick it to me.
You can kick it to
Yikes.
Pat. Pat
Yeah.
will take this. So yeah, we are doing our nominations for next 2 weeks from now. We are finally back to normal episodes. You know, we had our double episode because, or two core show episode because it was our 20th, and then we had the Valentine's Day one. And unfortunately, I was looking, and March 8th, which would be the show that we are nominating this for, there is no special date for that. I mean, that's close to the Boston Massacre, the Tea Party and everything else like that, but I don't think we celebrate that in anime culture too often. So I think we're just going to do a normal episode. So the four of us who were here get to nominate some shows that we would like to watch and vote on going into that week. So Johnny, since you always come prepared with shows ready to talk about, I'm going to kick it to you first. What show are you nominating for our show that week? Your mic is muted still.
Sorry about that. It's not every time I forget a show. It's just sometimes I do.
It's just most of the time. It's okay.
Yeah,
Go
okay.
ahead.
So the show I have nominated for this week. So a bit of a story about how I found this show. I'm the type of guy who like really likes to listen to like anime OPs and shit like that, and like I stumbled upon this ED, which was like I just found it so fun. I just wanted to see what the show was. So the show I'm nominating is Blood. Sorry, I can't speak. Blood Blockade Battlefront.
Okay.
And yeah, I think nobody's heard about the show. Maybe you have. Who knows?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Come on, bro.
Yeah, but like the ED for this show, like I'll send it to you guys later. I absolutely fucking love it, and I haven't even watched the show, so that's literally the only reason I nominated it. I'm gonna be honest, but yeah, that's my nomination.
There you go. All right. The
good
the
character design.
alliterating show, Blood Battlecade Block Front. I can't
See,
speak.
I'm not the only one. I'm not the
Well,
only
it's
one.
Battlefront and Beyond is, I believe,
Is what it's called.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
Battlefield
I'm not
Beyond.
looking at the title, so I'm just going off memory too. That's hard to speak though. I that's good alliteration, I guess. Pete, what have you got?
So this one I really have been trying to watch for a while. I think I've nominated in the past before, and Rifle from our Discord pushes it all the time. It's getting a second season. I am nominating Drifters.
Ooh.
Drifters. Okay. I don't think I've actually even heard of that. That's cool. That's cool. Alrighty. Miles, what have you got?
I'm gonna just re-up to Tommy Galaxy. One day we'll watch it.
There we go. I hope we will watch it someday too. And yeah, you're lucky that you're able to re-up a show. I guess I could do that too with the romance show that I
Yuri on
nominated.
Ice.
Yeah, well, I could re-up Yuri on Ice. I could re-up a lot of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-up Elfen Lied because, like Miles said, love is in the air. So let's watch some child murder, right? We'll be sick of love by that point, though. We'll have watched two shows full of love in the past few weeks. So instead, we get to watch some child murder and grotesque things and stuff. So let's do Elfen Lied. No, it's got some legacy points too, and I do want to eventually watch it at some point. So yeah, but yeah, that wraps us up. So now we will hand this off to Pete so that he can say what he needs to plug the Discord, plug our affiliation, yada yada yada.
Yeah, for sure. So as you can tell, we like that when the community can vote. We had community votes this time. So if you are interested in watching one of the shows that we just nominated. Join our Discord. Links in the description below. We have a channel called Anime Club. We can talk to you there or DM me on Twitter. Links to all that is in the description below. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. We have a really special episode for next week where we have Potato Gang versus Gabby Gang. We have our Attack on Titan episode. We finally got one. Miles will be debating Krissa from hashtag Anime Talk, and so it'll be super fun. So look forward to that. I will be live streaming that on Saturday. So if you're listening to this prior to February 13th, tune in to the live stream, twitch.tv/don'tsew3ts. That link will also be in the description below. But other than that, thank you so much, and we will see you in 2 weeks for Wodakoi. Bye, everybody.
Bye.